guys, welcome back to Room 237, and in one of my more recent videos, I did the 2021 reboot of Wrong Turn, which is still an anomaly to me. I still don't quite know how I feel about that. Definitely different. And while I was watching it and reviewing it, I realized, oh, crap, that's a review. That's a series that I haven't done yet. So, and I have the first 5. I do not have part 6, but I have seen it. I'll find a way to see it when I get there. And I know normally when a reboot or remake or upcoming sequel is about to come out, normal horror reviewers will do the series leading up to it. I didn't do that because I actually forgot that the reboot was coming out. It wasn't until I was at the store and I saw it already. But I've already done the reboot, so why not just do the series now? So we're going to go all the way back to 2003 with the original Wrong Turn. Now, this is a film that I did not see when it first came out. I was 12 years old, and I didn't see it till well after high school. I actually didn't even know what this movie was about. There's a few horror movies from that time that I didn't see until I was 18, 19, 20. This was one of them, along with 28 Days Later. Didn't really know what that was about up until I saw it, because I didn't really pay attention to it. Darkness Falls, which was given to me, but I've always heard that was a bad movie. And actually, this is not the first Wrong Turn I saw. The first one I saw was actually part 4. Because the friend I was living with, the girl he was dating at the time, redboxed part 4. And so that's how I saw part 4 and got to know what Wrong Turn was all about. And then I went back to the original, and I have to say I enjoyed it very much back then. I still enjoy it. I think it's definitely the best of the whole series, without a doubt. And it's been going on for almost 20 years now. This came out 18 years ago. So we're almost 20 years in, 7 movies in. It's definitely one of the longest running horror franchises of the 2000s. And these characters are definitely new icons of horror with this new millennium, along with the Creeper, Jigsaw, Victor Crowley, I guess Annabelle, the new Pennywise, I guess. And I would consider this a horror classic, as much as the early 2000s will warrant. Definitely early 2000s slasher films. And that's not to say that there were no good horror films from that time. I just always thought that the mid to late 90s, early 2000s was kind of a dry spell for horror. There were some good ones. But also, that wasn't that long ago. I mean, we're just now entering the first almost quarter century of the 2000s. But I can see why this is a classic. I mean, it has its established characters, loyal fan base. Despite what the reboot has done and how loose it can be at times, it has a lore. And I still enjoy this film. Obviously, this came out 3 years before the remake of Hills Have Eyes. But even before then, it was compared, I would say, less favorably, because it didn't get very good reviews. I think it's respected more retrospectively, but it was big compared to Hills Have Eyes. It does have a very, very, very similar, almost identical story. People from the city, off the beaten path, very rural area, and one by one attacked by cannibalistic hillbillies. But while Hills Have Eyes, and I'm not comparing it to the remake because this came out before it, but that was more of the revenge grindhouse film. This is more or less a straightforward slasher. Like, I've always seen it as more of Hills Have Eyes done in the style of like Madman or Friday the 13th. Which I think is a combination that works. This is the only one where the makeup effects are really stellar. Wrong Turn 2, they look decent as well, but the mutant effects in this, I think, are very well done. And that's because they are done by creature makeup effects maestro Stan Winston. It was directed by Rob Schmidt, who at this time had only done a couple short indie films, but he always wanted to make a horror film, and he loves 70s style horror. And that's exactly what this is. This, even though it has a pretty good body count with pretty good kills, it definitely has more of like the 70s pre-slasher vibe to it than, say, something like Hatchet, which feels pure 80s slasher. And actually, now that I've had a little bit more time to think about and digest the new reboot that just came out, this Wrong Turn definitely has inspirations from Hills Have Eyes and Chainsaw Massacre. And in the sense of inspiration or even throwing back to 70s films, the reboot is more like The Wicker Man or some stumbled upon cult kind of film. Or maybe even something like Cannibal Holocaust. Minus the cannibalism. But, which I think is fine. I think reboots do leave a little bit more room to be different. I mean, we've had 6 films with this approach that has been consistently getting worse and worse and worse. Why not try something different? But I may do a second review on the reboot at some point. Because the more I think about it, the more I do like it. I think you can do something different with a reboot. Because that's the whole point. You're rebooting it for more sequels. Try something different. But with this, directed by Rob Schmidt, even known for a couple short films. Always wanted to make a horror film. And it was written by Alan B. McElroy, who also wrote the reboot. I think, as I've already said before, it stars Desmond Harrington, who of course I know from season 3 and on of Dexter, Liza Dushku, Manuela Chirqui. I know I've actually heard most of these people are or were in Disney films in like the late 90s, earlier 2000s. Jeremy Sisto, Kevin Zegers, which actually, Kevin Zegers and Lindy Booth, who were a couple in this film, the following year would be a couple in the Dawn of the Dead remake. I also recognized the old man at the gas station, which is a huge trope of this film. Both Hills Have Eyes and Chainsaw Massacre had it. Actually, as did their remakes. Wayne Robson, I remember him from the Bride of the Dummy episode of Goosebumps. He was the guy that ran the show with Slappy. But anyway, of course, like most slasher films, we start out with these couples, or this couple that's only seen in the intro. They're mountain climbing. One guy gets killed on top of the cliff, then thrown off. The girl starts to get pulled up. Then she falls, almost hit the car, dragged away. We hear the laughter. And then we see Wrong Turn. So, we get the opening kill scene. The one thing I did like that kind of helps build the dread, which I think this movie did do a good job at, was after she falls, she hears like the laughter of the famous three-finger mutant and sees like the trees kind of moving as he's coming down the cliff. So then we see Desmond Harrington, who plays and even though I don't even really remember anyone's name from this film, Chris. He's a guy who I think is on his way to either a job interview or an important meeting. I think he's a doctor. Big traffic jam. He says, screws this, takes an alternate route, ends up at a gas station where we get the old hillbilly gas station attendant who doesn't really give him any kind of advice or directions. He says, what's this Bear Mountain Road? And the guy is very vague. But then when Desmond Harrington drives off, we get the vague sort of what you're in for line. Because I think he says something like, you're the one that's going to have to take care. As if, he knows what's in those woods, but he's not going to tell them. He has to tell us, the viewer. So he's driving down the road, and then he just crashes into this car that's been sitting right in the middle of the road. And it's full of these city kids. There's the engaged couple, the stoner couple, and then Liza Dushku. And so, crash. Everyone's pissed at Desmond Harrington. He's cool about it. Jeremy Sisto is the boyfriend in the engaged couple. He's sort of the fast-talking comic relief, which for some reason he always reminded me of Serge from System of a Down. But this time rewatching it, who did he remind me of? It'll come to me eventually. He always reminded me of Serge up until just this previous watch, and he reminded me of someone else completely. But the engaged couple, Eliza Dushku and Desmond Harrington, set off to find someone with a phone. Stoner couple stays behind. And they get high, they have sex, then they start going through Desmond Harrington's car, eating his snacks and throwing his CDs around. But then Kevin Zegers is killed off screen, and Lindy Booth gets like the barbed wire or razor wire around like her mouth and like pulled away off screen. And then we get longer scenes of like just dialogue between these characters, like Jeremy Sisto and his fiance talking about the wedding. Couple jump scares, like the fake out, like boo gotcha scares. But eventually they end up at this very creepy cabin house where Jeremy Sisto actually says, because they all insist on going inside. Find a phone, find a bathroom. And Jeremy Sisto is like, mountain people, West Virginia, not a good idea. They say something else, and he's like, might I remind you about a little film called Deliverance, which is something I would say in that situation. Even though, obviously, Deliverance takes place in Georgia, but they go inside anyway, and this movie does do a better job than most slashers at the time at really building its tension. I mean, apart from just obscuring and not really showing what the mutants look like, it does do a great job at just building. Because they're walking around the inside of this creepy-ass mountain cabin, and they're just touching and looking at everything. Desmond Harrington actually goes over to the fridge, finds all these like Tupperware and jars full of bloody whatevers inside. And then this rusted old tow truck pulls up, so they all hide. Dushku and Harrington hide under the bed. Sisto and his fiance hide in like the back room. And so we really just see like feet and shins of these three brothers that are coming in. And they drop the body of Lindy Booth in front of the bed. And of course she's like garroted almost all the way through her head. There is this one really CGI shot where they put her up on the counter and start hacking her up. Camera kind of comes around, looks in at this keyhole where we see a CGI eye in the keyhole with like the reflection of them cutting up Lindy Booth. Which when they do, there is this nice cut and this nice editing where, because like the reflection on her eye is kind of like holding it, but then when they come down, it shows her, the actress, with her, Jeremy Sisto's covering her mouth. The character's name is Carly. Her, because I can't pronounce her last name. Jeremy Sisto has Carly's mouth covered, but the way she kind of like, it looks like she's going to scream despite her mouth being covered, but when she does, it's like the laughter of Three Finger, the maniacal laughter. So it's just, the way it's put together plays out nicely. Also, one of the hillbillies drops a shotgun shell, lands like right in front of Desmond Harrington. So like the mutant has to keep feeling around for it, and they have to keep like moving back. It's something we've seen a bunch of times in horror films and slasher films, but I think it did play out kind of nicely. So then sometime later, apparently all three brothers are still there, but they really just show one. The oldest and largest one, Sawtooth. They get out from under the bed. They get the other two to come out from the back room. They go out the screen door, but the spring squeaks. Desmond Harrington holds it, and you get he's in pain. You see the blood coming down his hand. They all get out. And just as he looks to check Sawtooth again, he sees that the eyes are open, just a dun dun. Gets out, runs. And they all go up the hill. They drive off. They end up at this like car boneyard where just they've dumped the cars of all their victims throughout the years, which we would see similarly in the remake of Hills Have Eyes. And so then the mutants pull up again in their truck, and they're all hiding behind these vehicles. And again, we always see the mutants either from behind or like very obscure angles, like from here down or whatnot, which I think is very effective. Like, don't really show them. We can tell by like the back of their heads and like their shoulders that they're messed up looking, that they're not normal. And of course, Three Fingers always just like his arms are always like outstretched, and he's always just kind of cackling, which he's played by someone that I've seen before as well. He's Julian Richings. Oh yes, he was in he was the Exterminator in Naked Lunch. He was in Urban Legend, Weird Janitor, Ticket Taker in Detroit Rock City. Was he the... No, he wasn't. I keep thinking he was like the assistant on the old Lara Croft films. But no, he wasn't. James O'Flynn in Survival of the Dead. Lorem in Man of Steel. Okay, well. He's one of those character actors I'm sure people will recognize. So Desmond Harrington decides to run off in the woods this way to distract him, because I think One Eye has a shotgun, Sawtooth has a bow and arrow, Three Finger has his two knives. They shoot and they hit Harrington in, I think, his left leg, which I was doing some reading, and just sort of some backstory on it. And I guess Desmond Harrington hurt his ankle really bad around this time during the shoot. So he had to favor his other leg. But that leg was the one that was supposedly shot, so he had to act like he was favoring his first leg, which is the one that he really hurt his ankle on. But he stuck with it. I imagine that was fun. So they go to collect Desmond Harrington, but then Jeremy Sisto runs off in the other direction. And he's like, fuckers, assholes, fuckers. So then they all head off towards him, and the two girls go get Desmond Harrington. They get in their truck, they drive off. And throughout this film, up until she dies, the character of Carly will just stop and just cry like, I can't. Like, you can't just get in the truck, just get in the truck. So driving down the road, Jeremy Sisto is coming. All of a sudden he just stops. And they're asking him, like, they see him, they stop, and they're like, what are you doing? Come on. And he stops, and I like how you just hear the and then you see the sort of CGI blood come out. Yeah, there's some CGI, but it's all right. It's better than other low-budget slasher films I've seen from that time or since. And then arrows start coming through him. They realize he's dead. So they drive off. He gets collected. And I think an arrow hits like the tire. Or they drive up to this old watchtower, which is tall as hell. I mean, they're on a mountain. Of course, Carly's yelling, "Hello, anybody up there?" She's the idiot that makes all the mistakes. So they climb up the watchtower. They get up there, and then they try using the radio to call for help. And then at night, which this is more good. I do like how the suspense and atmosphere is done with this. They look down and they see the torches from the three brothers. And I know some people say they don't like the kind of language that they use. They use this sort of inbred, unintelligible Sims kind of language. Like the older brothers are more like, while Three Finger is just more like a constant cackle. But then the radio starts to screech because someone's coming in. So Carly's just like, "Hi, yes, hello, help us," even though they just killed all the lights so they wouldn't be found. And then they think maybe they went away, maybe they didn't hear us. Starts filling up with smoke. They've set fire to the watchtower to draw them out. Carly goes to jump out the window to say, "Fuck this," and Desmond Harrington's like, "Right, yeah, we better jump." So they jump, and then they land on branches, which is kind of funny because Carly's wearing like a Billy shirt tank top, as is Eliza Dushku. And so, I mean, like their stomach, lower back, shoulders, arms, and chest, upper back is all exposed. And they're falling through all these branches and not one cut. Which actually, Eliza Dushku actually falls out sideways. And I think she actually did her own stunt with this. Where like she fell and like she landed sideways. And she had to like do this thing where she like fell off the branch but had to like spin around the branch and like catch it. Must have killed every rib in her body, but or even if not the actress, the character. But so they're up there, they start just hanging out in the tree. Then all of a sudden the arrows start hitting them. Carly starts to walk, And I will say this is a CGI effect that still kind of holds up with how they did it. Because Carly backs up into a, like, which first of all, this is like the most dense, thick branch forest I've ever seen, because they're just kind of able to walk wherever. And she kind of like backs herself up against the actual trunk of the tree. And then Three Finger, you know, we get shot behind her with Three Finger and the axe. He hits her like right with the cheeks. And I think it was the top of her head was real. Like they built a tree for her to stand in. Which, or like, how was it they said they did it? The whole thing is CGI when you see from the front. And they got like the axe across the mouth. But then we get like the up close of her pupil dilating to show that she's dead. Originally they wanted it to blink because they thought that was creepy, but they liked the idea of just the dilation. And as it dilates, we pan out and up on top of her head, so that from the top of her head is the actress, it's real, but the tree, the axe, and the body and all the branches below are CGI. And we go directly across and we just see the limp body fall and hit every branch on the way down. I thought that was a really neat effect. So then they get the idea to pull a branch back, lure Three Finger, let go and hit him out of the tree, which they do. And this is when we first actually see Three Finger. And I will say, even though I like part 2, this is the only film where Three Finger actually looks menacing and scary and creepy. Because every other movie gives him this really wild, long, white hair, almost like a wizard. But here it's like just, he actually looks like an inbred hillbilly. And he's got like the snicker and like the maniacal laugh. And he's doing like the taunting with the knives. But he's like cornering Eliza Dushku, and he kind of does this Hannibal Lecter kind of suckling sound, like as he's like taunting her with the knives. But then, like with a branch, hit him out of the tree, he does the loud scream. They seem to go off. They come down from the tree, hide out behind the waterfall, make it out to the road. There's the sheriff comes up. He's like, "Are you the one from the watchtower? We've been looking everywhere for you." Eliza Dushku is like, "Help me, they're all dead." And the sheriff's like, "Dead? What people?" Then arrow right through the back of the head and out the eye. He goes down and I think it was Sawtooth goes down, collects Eliza Dushku. Who was it? Oh, okay, no, they're walking through the woods. And, they push Desmond Harrington down a hill. They take Eliza Dushku. Then he runs into the sheriff. Sheriff gets shot behind the head with the arrow. And then Sawtooth goes to collect the sheriff's car. And then Desmond Harrington, like, cabin fever rides it. I keep doing that cabin fever. Cape Fear. He Cape Fear rides it by grabbing like the frame or the drive shaft or whatever. Gets back to the cabin. We get the long scene of her tied to the bed. The mutants preparing to cut everyone up. And here we actually get a good look at the mutants. You know, we get One Eye, who's sort of like he's like the middle brother. He's like the child. Sawtooth is the big brute. He's got like a really big cleft palate, but he's the big brute. And then Three Fingers, of course, the youngest, and he's the maniac. But Desmond Harrington just comes right through, crashing the cop car through the house. Which actually, first I think he throws like a Molotov at it, catches it on fire, then drives through. But runs over One Eye. Then there's like a big fight with him and Sawtooth and Eliza Dushku and Sawtooth. Eventually, I mean, he gets shot a bunch of times with an arrow. And this is one of those slasher films where no matter what you do to these killers, they just won't die. I mean, Three Finger gets an axe to the chest. One Eye's been run over with the car. Sawtooth has been hit with numerous weapons and shot in the back of the head with an arrow. I think he's been shot a number of times with arrows. They got the shotgun with one shot left. They back up. He waits for the flames to sort of hit the gas cans in the back of the sheriff truck. And when he does, he shoots it, blows the whole house up. No way any of them are alive. So then they get in their tow truck, they drive off. They end up at the gas station from the beginning, which when I get to Wrong Turn 5, I'm going to bring this guy up again, or I'm going to bring this scene up again, because the old guy at the gas station sees the truck and he just gets up, goes inside, shuts the door, and he kind of like cowers behind the window and like watches. But then looks stunned when he sees it's, just Desmond Harrington. All beat up, of course, but he comes down, rips down the map, assuming so they can find their way back, but also so no one else will see the detour that's drawn on it. Then they drive off. And then we get the post-credit scene, or mid-credit scene, of another sheriff's office truck pulling up to the blown up house at night. He's looking around, sees a couple of legs sticking out from the debris, moves some stuff around, sees the person has no head. Three Finger shows up behind him in silhouette, turns around with the flashlight, sees a completely burnt out Three Finger, who gives out his scream, see that he swings. Cut to black, hear the maniacal laugh, credits with Breaking Benjamin plays. As much as it is like a Hills Have Eyes, Chainsaw Massacre, wandering off into the wilderness and encountering inbred cannibalistic hillbillies, I will say I do like this film. It does have a fair amount of... It has a fair amount of the suspense and atmosphere. Its kills are fairly consistent throughout the film. It does have its blend of practical effects and CGI, but the CGI, other than the blood coming through on Jeremy Sisto's shirt, which they could have used squibs, I guess, but like the CGI effect with Carly's eye and her body falling down the tree, they use it for very creative reasons like that. I always loved the sequence of when they're in the house and they have to hide and they have to sneak out. I always thought that was the perfect amount of dread, suspense. The jump scares are mostly fake outs, like in the beginning with Jeremy Sisto and Carly kind of going back and forth, scaring each other. Those are the fake outs here. We do get some exposition between Eliza Dushku and Desmond Harrington while they're hiding behind the waterfall. It is a pretty by-the-numbers standard slasher film, but I will say for the early 2000s, it does stand out. And it's my favorite one of the series. And I will say I do like the reboot. Again, like I've said earlier, I've I've had a couple days to think about the reboot, and we've had 6 movies in this direction. I think the reboot is just fine. You know, it's still essentially the same thing. A group of people ending up in the woods. They wind up going too far or the wrong direction. They encounter a group of people that doesn't want them there, but they do something different with it. And I'll say the acting is fine. I mean, I've seen way worse in this series alone. But I think Desmond Harrington, Eliza Dushku, they all do a good job. The thing I appreciate the most, other than still using practical effects, even at least half the time, is not just how the makeup looks, but how they use it. They did kind of take a Jaws route by obscuring them with camera angles or darkness or objects. Like, you'll also get shots where, like, Sawtooth is pulling back the bow, and you'll see him covering up his face. Up until, like, the very end with the final fight at the cabin. I think that's very effective. I also like the sequence of them up in the trees and, you know, just sort of showing the brothers at a distance, hearing them talking and calling each other, seeing the torches in the distance. It builds the suspense, it builds the tension, which I think this does have more than most slashers or even horror films in general at that time. I really like Wrong Turn. Favorite one of the series. I do wish I saw it when I was younger. It is kind of like Jeepers Creepers, where that's more of a throwback to like the B horror movies of like the 50s, 40s through the 60s. This is a throwback to just like the grindhouse, drive-in, hillbilly cannibal movie, like Chainsaw Massacre or, you know, Hills Have Eyes. Really like Wrong Turn, always have. And this may be the only other one that's not a rant as far as the original series goes, but I'll get to that next. But anyway, Wrong Turn, always liked it. Stay tuned for the rest of the series. If you like Wrong Turn or this review, please be sure to drop a like. And you can also find Room 237 reviews on Instagram and Facebook. And anyways, I thank you for watching.